We may not have a lot of people in here that could diagnose and repair technology to tie in with 5 satellites and control all the machine functions and guidance. So this education and the opportunity for local individuals to learn how to come back home and support their agricultural community and make a very good living while doing that is particularly important to us at John Deere.
Steve, the transportation industry and logistics.
Well, and I think we have we're not different than everyone else. We have a lot of open positions, not only in our driving positions, but our maintenance technicians as well, IT. It goes across the whole spectrum. And I think one of the good things about an environment like this, where we're kind of getting our eyes and our ears opened, is the fact that so many people truly don't understand the real demographic change that is going on in our country and around the world, in fact. And I think that's the underlying issue that kind of exacerbates a lot of these other problems that we're having. But, I think I'm very proud of what we do and the way that we do it. But there's so much technology involved in our day-to-day life now that we need to make sure that we have not just from a maintenance standpoint, but from a operator standpoint as well. And I always illustrate, it's amazing that he can get within 1 inch out in the middle of that pasture, and it's important. But, we go to the moon and back every day with my company, and we're within 3 feet of your family at all times. So it's really, really important that our people are well trained, properly rested, and drug and alcohol free. So, which also creates another challenge in today's world.
All right, we're going to be willing to take questions from any of you throughout this course of this lunch panel. There are some microphones through here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you've got some questions, just kind of migrate over to one of them and we'll recognize you at the appropriate time. So go ahead and finish eating first. I'll go ahead and keep some of the conversation going until then. Steve, I want to start with you and work our way back because this is an Arkansas-specific audience. You guys have seen what goes on not only in Arkansas but in other states and across the nation. But I want you to speak maybe a little bit more specifically to what you're seeing in Arkansas as it pertains to the challenges that you're facing in terms of workforce.
Well, I guess predominantly, for example, our company, we recruit drivers from 24 different states at truck driving schools around the country. We bring all those individuals into North Little Rock where we do additional training to finish them for the program at tremendous expense. There isn't a pipeline of those individuals for the jobs that we have available because not only, it's not about the money, but it is about the money. It's a lifestyle issue and pride in the work that you do. And so many of the people that came into our industry when I first started in the industry came off the farm. And if you're listening to some of the statistics from this morning, there's not as many people on the farm anymore. And Phil's got them all out working on nice John Deere tractors that cost $500,000 a piece. We can actually do something about that would be helpful. But anyway, that's another story. But realistically, we're just at a point in time where the people that are willing to do the jobs that we have they're not as prevalent as they were at one time. And I think it's not necessarily about the younger generation, quite frankly, but the world, I use this as an illustration. If you get frustrated driving between Little Rock and Memphis because of the number of trucks on the road, well, that's not the only place that it's like that. In our driver's life, he spends a lot of time dealing with that frustration as well. So there's just an awful lot of things that are changing right now, dynamics that are not necessarily working in our favor at a time when our economy is going to continue to grow. And I think some of the statistics are startling. There will be a third more GDP in the next 8-9 years. That means a third more congestion, if you will, or traffic on the road. So it's imperative that the people that we put out there have the right skills to actually be able to operate in that much more congested environment if we're going to have a positive effect on safety, the environment, and the economy, quite frankly.
Well, so You've got drivers, you've got logistics folks, you've got mechanics, technicians. What does somebody make on average working for you in those different fields?
You know, I didn't hear a word you said. You're reverberating.
Oh,
I didn't.
I'm trying to figure out how much does somebody make working in one of those jobs for you?
Oh. Well, I think that price point's going up as it needs to. A driver that starts with us would, depending on the division that he would work in, he or she would work in, would start about $52,000 and would go to about $80,000. So that's the range currently, and they'll learn every penny of it. The maintenance techs range $15 to $25 an hour typically, and then there's all kinds of other jobs that are around that. But I think for context, I think it's important. For example, if we go into a dealership to have one of our trucks worked on, there'll be a really skilled technician that'll be making about $50 an hour that will actually be able to do the diagnosis of the 7 or 8 computers that are on our trucks and make them go. So I mean, the billed labor rate at a shop is $110 an hour for the tech. So I mean, we're seeing people, or even a service manager at a high cost automobile dealership, depending on where you are in the country, will be $70,000 to $150,000 a year position. So there's a lot of money being spent to get that brain power properly, trained.
All right, Phil, how about you? What are you kind of seeing in terms of, if you can specifically talk about something in the Arkansas arena, but what are you seeing in terms of that pressure?
I'm struggling with the reverberation.
We do have a little, but tell me what you're seeing along the lines of what Steve was talking about there.
Certainly. When Steve was talking about the technicians, we're probably in the same kind of range in terms of compensation and packages. And obviously in the more rural areas, typically the compensation is lower. And in fact, I looked back in preparation for this meeting, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics was showing technicians and drivers and so forth were in similar ranges, but it just depends so much. The range is so broad because those people that have the higher level skills, just like Steve alluded to, some of the technicians that are truly diagnostic technicians, our GPS diagnostic technicians will be up, like Steve talked about, with those higher end scales. The starting technicians will certainly, they'll come out of these schools in that $15, $20, $25 range probably. But the important thing for people to understand about programs like John Deere has with Arkansas State at Beebe is every one of those 70 students in that program are in there sponsored by a John Deere dealer. That means an organization like Greenway, who is a huge dealer organization for John Deere in the state of Arkansas, and they're here today. They've got 23 students in there that are being educated, that work at the dealerships during breaks and sometimes when they don't have class for other reasons. They have a job. When they graduate, they've got a job. And that's what I think this whole conference is about. How do we get people educated and into jobs that have these compensation packages that create a good standard of life? And that's what we're all about.
All right, Bill, you got a lot of variety in the different types of trades and different types of workers in your industry. What kind of pressures are you feeling?
Well, I think we're in an environment today where I think our biggest challenge is not figuring out how to properly train and educate and compensate craftsmen. Our biggest challenge is to make our industry attractive enough to get them to come into it. I think we have an image problem. I think we have done a poor job of acquainting people with how successful they can be with a good craft or a technical career. And a good example, there's a school that we're working for in Lawrence, Kansas School District. They've got a great program there. It's called Classroom to Career. And they start students when they're about the 8th or 9th grade, and they help them determine what kind of career path they're going to be on. And then in those high schools, they provide career training that basically prepares them once they graduate to get a job immediately. And I think there are similar situations to some degree in the state. But more than the factor of providing an educational platform with great teachers and funding, if we can't overcome the problem of the lack of understanding and appreciation for the tremendous success a person can have in a craft, we're going to continue to struggle to get people into the crafts. Mm-hmm. And then in addition to that, I was mentioning to Roby earlier, we've got another big challenge in front of us, and that is being able to retain these top-end craftsmen and technicians, not only in our industry, but also in our state. If you look at what's happening around us, all along the Gulf Coast, there's a tremendous growth in the economy driven by energy. There's building going on like we've never seen before from Houston all the way into Florida. 83,000 construction workers are going to be needed in Louisiana alone between now and the end of 2017. Well, where are they going to come from? I'm pretty certain they're not going to train every one of them in Louisiana. My guess is we're going to get robbed by the other states by drawing those people there with salaries and benefits and conditions that we haven't had the challenge of in the past.
So let's talk about this image problem that Bill's mentioned, because it probably applies to y'all's fields as well. Whose responsibility is that? Who is going to take the bull by the horns and make that happen? Is it a national trade association? Is it whose responsibility is that?
I think one thing I'm observing that I think has got potential to be highly successful. First of all, there's a sense of urgency that is developing among government, and you talked about the lack of economic development that will happen within this state and other states if we don't have an adequate workforce to construct the facilities or operate facilities after there. So I think the sense of urgency is the first message. The second thing that I'm seeing on a national level, trade groups in our industry, like the Associated General Contractors of America, Associated Builders and Contractors, are creating platforms now where they're able to offer to schools and trade schools and colleges help and assistance in providing the right kind of training information that's going to produce the graduate that the industry needs. So there's this coalition being worked on, and certainly in Arkansas we're having the same thing. The Associated General Contractors here and other trade groups are working closely with our industries to help figure out what we need. Now we got to bring educators and government together to create a complete program that delivers an end product that's going to meet the needs of industry.
What do you think, Phil? What have you seen in other states that have maybe done this more successfully than what you're seeing in Arkansas?
Well, I think that Bill's right, that business and industry really has to lead this, whether it's through trade groups or through individual large corporations like I happen to be with. And they have to go work with local educational institutions. And having had the opportunity to work with many educational institutions across the United States and Canada and in other parts of the world, in fact, not all are the same. Everybody's focus is different. Everyone has different resources and different interests. And you have to find, as a business and industry entity, you have to find that educational institution or those ones that would share your goals and objectives, that'll work with you. And then you put a plan and a strategy and a business plan together that you can take to government and ask for financing. And our example in Arkansas is a very excellent example where we have worked with Arkansas State at BB, worked with Dr. McKay, and he's been able to work with the legislators and the staffing in the state of Arkansas to get government financing for some facilities and things that we needed to grow the program. It's very difficult for change to occur if we as individuals and entities sit back and wait for the government to address this, because it really doesn't work that way. So we've got to take the initiative, is what I believe, Roby.
Steve?
Well, you know, the buck usually stops right at your own feet, and we've had to take it on ourselves, particularly from a driving standpoint. I mean, we spend tens of millions of dollars advertising that we hire people. Wow, that's great news. That was a good investment. But we do it anyway. We're just throwing everything that we can at it, including more money. But again, the responsibility, I think, falls on each respective industry to figure out its particular needs and how it can interface with the opportunities that do exist in the educational community. There are other barriers that exist. For example, in a truck driving job, even if that was a career of choice and not a career of last resort for some individual, that individual has to be 21 years of age in order to be operating in interstate commerce. They can operate a commercial vehicle, perhaps in some states. In Arkansas, I believe it's 18, if you were inclined to want to see an 18-year-old behind one of our trucks. But they can do it. They used to do it all the time, by the way. Several years ago, I asked a question of some very seasoned, very good, the very best, if you will, drivers. I said, how many of y'all were driving a truck when you were 21? And they all hold their hands up. And when you were 18, they all hold their hands up. And 16, they all hold their hands up. Most of them lived on farms, and they were honestly answering the question. So they had that kind of experience. Fast forward till today, and most of the people that are driving our trucks today, we taught how to drive a truck. An individual that maybe came to us when they were 40 or 45 years old as a second career. So it's a whole different dynamic. So each business has a particular challenge that maybe they're better equipped to deal with it or not, you know.
And how old were you when you first started driving a truck?
Oh, I was about 12.
12? And your dad?
That was not true.
All right, we've got a question over at number 4 over here. Can you state your name and your question?
My name is Ann Tucker. I work for the Department of Career Education. I'm the State Program Advisor for construction, welding, and automotive and diesel programs across the state in the secondary levels. What I'd like to do first is thank John Deere and Maverick for coming to the state and offering their services. The program up at ASU is exemplary. Could we put it on a secondary level down in the Delta where all your equipment is?
So I can't hear the question.
This is a challenge to John Deere. We have a wonderful program in the middle of the state. Wonderful. I would like to see that expanded. I would like to see more in the secondary arena. I would like our high school students to be able to be aware of your program.
All right. How can we make the high school students more aware of your programs?
Yes, a good question, and that's the one thing that we struggle with on a day-to-day basis is how do we make more students aware? And we believe we have to get to the students in the high school time frame. And in fact, I was speaking with our executive from the dealership, the Greenway dealership organization here earlier today. They now have a full-time recruiter that just is dedicated to traveling, visiting high schools, along with other employment-related activities to try to get the word out. We've got a significant amount of information on our websites about our John Deere Tech program, but you've really touched on something that's probably one of our limiting factors right now is how do we get it out? And the way we really struggle to get that out, we put a lot of effort into it, is our local dealer representatives, our local dealers, because they're all independently owned, going to the high schools, making the contacts, and trying to help both the administrators, the faculty, and as many students as possible to be aware of the program that we offer today.
I'd be happy to help in any way I can. There are 23 programs in the state of Arkansas that offer automotive technician, and there are 2 high school diesel programs. 2. I would love to have more. Maverick?
Thank you.
Challenge you. Do you want to start a diesel program? The state of Arkansas is looking for industry and looking for help in the with industry to connect our students.
So let me ask you, is money the problem? You need money to help do this?
Always.
For
Always.
advertising?
I have right
Get your
now.
checkbook out.
I have 6 colleges that are high school, secondary, technical centers that would be thrilled to start a program. The next question is funding.
So, Steve, you want to break your checkbook out right now,
Yeah,
or do you want her to put a proposal together for you?
Well, let me challenge her and the others in the room a little bit first as well. You know, I asked our VP of Maintenance before this meeting if we had a wish list, what could we do to better equip the individuals that we are investing in, what would the skill set be? And I heard the same comment over here. You know, obviously it's the basics, you know, reading, writing, and math. I mean, people, you cannot comprehend how, number one, for example, that $500,000 tractor he's talking about, each one of mine's about $150,000. Well, the computer technology on this, the safety technology, the environmental technology has made this a very fragile piece of equipment. And we have a lot more downtime today because of the environmental technology that we're using, which I'm a big advocate for, but it's added a real cost. But the complexity of these systems is amazing. And it's a good thing, but it also raises the bar on the techs that we need to hire and the skill sets that they have. Our techs read at about a 6th grade level. Many are challenged. You know, the certification processes that we use, the internal training processes that we use to continue to improve the tech's abilities, you know, they're all related to money. And again, I think it's not about money, but there is going to be a price point that will attract certain individuals to do different things that they typically wouldn't necessarily do. But it is about us reinvesting in that educational curriculum that pertains to, in this case, maintenance techs. And it's a job that I think many of us have looked at through the years as maybe one, not your first choice, maybe not your first career choice. And in fact, you know, we have many people that have been with us in excess of 20, 25 years that we bought them their first set of tools. And, you know, we have a lot of incentives in place, tuition reimbursement and things like that, created financial bridges that, in fact, can lead people to us. And everyone is trying different things across the country, and some with greater success than others. But I can tell you that it's not a problem in search of a solution. It is very real. And even on the truck driver side of things, I think for context, again, I think some of these numbers would be helpful about the challenge we're talking about. The industry is short 35,000 drivers today. It's projected to grow to a shortage of 240,000 by the year 2022. The average number of drivers that the industry needs, this is just Class 8 over the road, you know, picture the truck you see going up down the highway, Class 8 vehicles, 96,000 individuals per year in order for us just to maintain where we currently are. Changing demographics are really going to exacerbate that problem. And I mean, we have 100 trucks parked right now without drivers. I really need about 500 more. But the reality is I can buy trucks all day, but if I don't have anybody to put in them or to work on them, they're better off staying at the dealership.
You're the 4th largest trucking company in Arkansas, is that right?
I don't know.
You don't know. So who's bigger than you? JB Hunt?
Getting smaller by the day.
JB Hunt, Walmart, Arkansas Best, bigger than you?
Oh, yeah.
I think all of y'all need to, you know, get your checkbooks out. You need to get him a proposal.
Absolutely. We're available at the Arkansas Department of Career Education, 682-1500.
You
Please call.
Come find him when this is over and
Absolutely.
give him your card. All right.
Thank
Bill,
you
I want
very
you to
much.
address her same topic there in terms of what she's seeing, this lack of funding to promote more of these programs and get more people in these programs.
I think from our perspective in our industry, there's always tremendous opportunity to form partnerships with people that are encouraging people to go into the crafts. Our firm, for example, for a number of years has been doing an outreach program. We will go even into junior high level and start to acquaint counselors and students about the different career paths in construction. It's been somewhat moderately successful, I would say, at best. And I think, part of it is, as I talked about earlier, their image, the concept that you've got to get out and work in the cold and the mud or the hot weather and so on and so forth. And, those things are true. We can't change that environment. But the thing we have to do is get younger people especially more familiar with the new technologies and the things that are happening in our industry. And it is a lot more exciting than just taking a shovel and digging a ditch. We got some great equipment we can do those kinds of things with. But we have to make it more attractive to a younger generation of people and let them understand the successes they can have and how they're going to get to use a lot of technology. One of the other things I think, have you ever seen or looking in a magazine and it's showing you a picture of a plumber or electrician or a welder or somebody? They're typically going to be in a very dirty kind of setting. They're going to see sparks flying all over the place and those kinds of things. But that's not what it's all about in our industry either. So, in short, we need to do a better job. We need to have better partnerships, but we need to present a much better image and a much more realistic image of what careers can be in the construction industry. And we welcome the opportunity to get to come and talk to students, take them on tours, show them what goes on in a building, and let them meet some of these people and hear their career story. That's been our biggest successes.
Phil, she seems pretty happy with you. Did you want to touch any more on what she had to say before we go over here? Did you want to touch on any more what she had to say?
You talking to me? No, I didn't hear.
Yeah, do you want to touch on anything else that she mentioned?
Oh, no, let's
All right.
proceed.
Let's come over here to microphone 1. Identify yourself and your question.
I am Rocky Mantooth. I'm with the Arkansas Department of Career Education also. I work at the Office of Apprenticeship. And Nabholz does have a program with us in their carpentry program. We appreciate that program. So I want to make people aware that you can start apprenticeship programs in your dealerships or your programs to help with this. Also, when you were talking about learning and education and get them to read and write, there also are adult learning education programs out there that can help them get their GEDs, learn to read while they're going to these schools and apprenticeship schools. So there are some things happening along those lines. The apprenticeship office also is beginning to get out into the high schools, CT programs, different places, promote these things for that to help get these kids aware of the opportunities and the skilled technical training opportunities, learning that they make a good living at it, that they can also do all these things while earning money and training at the same time. So,
What's the limitation on what you're trying to do right now? Why do you think that it's not more widespread or more popular or having more of an impact?
We find a lot of times that they have to go through the U.S. Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship, so they have to do a federal paperwork first for us to get involved. That seems to be a deterrent in some cases. Other times I think it's just that they don't have the teachers or trainers there available at their offices. And so if we could get a little bit more of the companies involved with us in this case, hopefully we could start some more apprenticeship programs. We're open for those opportunities, and we're willing to help if somebody would just call us up down there at the office. There's 3 of us in the office, so we get scattered a little bit sometimes. But we do have 31 plumbing schools statewide, about 52 electrical schools, have a couple of carpentry schools, painters, electricians, sheet metal, welders, pipe fitters. So we do have a lot of programs around the state. So those are available. But we're open for opportunities. If you have places we can speak or present, or if you have in your office or in your industry that you need some kind of a program to start, you can run that. We can help you kind of get up and running and do those kind of things to you. There's assistance there if you just give us the opportunity to do that.
I saw a few legislators in here earlier too. I hope they're listening to what you had to say. What has been y'all's experience with apprenticeship programs and what he was just talking about?
I can comment a little bit about apprenticeship programs from a John Deere perspective, because in countries of the world where there are formal structured apprenticeship programs required as a part of education for young people to move into the workforce, I'll use Canada as our closest physical example. We've got 5 programs in Canada that are very, very similar to the program that we have here in the state of Arkansas, with 5 different colleges in Canada. And obviously there are courses requirements that those programs have included. Those programs, we simply, I would say, flex our training requirements for the technical aspects of machine knowledge to fit within those. And we do that in other parts of the world as well, in Australia and other parts of the world. In the U.S., I guess one could argue one of the shortcomings we have in today's world, in the U.S., in today's scenario, is we don't have a lot of formal skilled trades apprenticeship programs. And so that doesn't exist unless somebody develops them. And traditionally, if educational programs or educational institutions develop those, they have to have support and involvement from business in order to ensure there's an inflow of students. And that is one of the critical aspects to this. And I say all the time that these programs can't work, whether it's an apprentice program or a program like we have, without the business and industry partner, the educational institution that really is committed and makes it work, and then the students who are recruited into these programs that really have an interest in that field of endeavor. It takes all 3, but as Steve said, the buck stops with us in business and industry. If we don't go out and actively start to work with education, and if the educational institutions don't have an interest in working and developing, as I think the governor said this morning, no single solution. Every solution's got to be different for Bill's business or Steve's business or ours. But that's what's required, is the different types of solutions with those 3 entities involved.
Does it have to be different in different parts of the country, different parts of the state as well, Bill?
You know, across the country, I really can't speak to the issue. I know that in some areas of the country where there are strong union presence, unions still continue to lead apprenticeship training programs. But in many cases, those particular situations create probably more problems than they solve problems, in the sense that they are all kind of demanding work rules and so on and so forth. In response to the apprenticeship, and I want to say amen to what was said over here earlier, we have had a very successful in-house Department of Labor certified carpentry apprentice program since 1972. And we train, because we've trained not only a lot of carpenters for our firm, but for other firms as well. The problem, though, is it is mentioned earlier, is certification. The only construction trades right now that require a formal certification are journeyman electrician or master electrician and journeyman plumbers. And if you're a welder, you can only be certified to do certain types of welding. High-pressure vessel welding is a whole different thing. You have to have specialized certification. But you don't have to be certified to be a mason or a drywall person or a painter. It's a skill, it's a craft, it's very important to the industry, but there's no certification required for it. So to some degree, apprenticeship is never going to get driven to an extreme level without a requirement for certification. I mean, it's learned on the job. They do a great job, but there's no mandate that you have a certification. So I think and back to the initial question, without a doubt, I think you're hearing it across the board up here, this problem can't be solved by a single entity. It can't be solved by business alone, and it certainly can't be solved by educators and government without active and serious participation from business and industries. And it's those kind of coalitions, I think, that get us there. One other comment I want to make real quickly. I don't want us to forget, because we're talking an awful lot about students that are coming out of high schools or maybe trade schools and so forth. I think there's another huge pool of potential people that a couple of tools that we need to be considering. One of them is re-educating and retraining of current workforce to elevate them to a higher statute where they do have the ability to earn more and get better benefits. So re-educating some of the people that are already in our industries and giving them a better opportunity for career growth. And then the second or the third element that I think is critically important is providing the kind of environment that ensures that we can maintain as many of the people, the senior people in our workforces, and not be losing them at the earliest possible age, because those are still some of our best performers. So it has to be kind of a all-inclusive front here, in my opinion.
I'll let you guys add on to what he had to say if you want to.
I have nothing to add on.
You're not going to get back in the cab and start driving again, Steve? We're talking about our seniors needing to be, rely on it.
See the world, see Chicago, see Cleveland. Yeah.
I have to tell this story too, because one of my favorite things to do, I've been out to Steve's place before and watched some of the training that goes on. Can I tell this story?
Yeah,
it's
okay.
one of my favorite stories.
So.
So we had some video equipment because we were videotaping some of the training here, and we were skimming a big old jib over the top of the crowd that was in there, and you had a packed room of people there. How many people, say if you have a class of 50, how many of them make it all the way through?
I'm sorry, Roby?
If you have a class of 50 that you're training for, say, drivers, how many of them make it through all the way?
50%.
About half. All right. So this one guy has this thing that looks like a birthmark on the top of his head. And so I'm telling the camera guy, go a little closer on that. I've got to see what that is. And it was a tattoo on top of his bald head. And it said, "This side up." I thought it was...
Yeah, that's the president of our company now.
I thought he was head of cargo and inventory, which would have made a lot of sense for him to have that tattoo. That was good.
Roby, I think, talking, of course, I focus on drivers because we have so many more drivers than we do anything else. And that's what I seem like we've been dealing with for many, many years. But things have gotten, even more challenging because of all the regulations that we're advocating for. Again, thinking about that environment that we're operating in, I mean, we're making it's like tough love. We need to get this right. We have an opportunity here in our industry to really double down and get this right at a time when it's the most challenging, because the other opportunity is to just say whatever, and commerce is going to move, but it's going to move in a much more dangerous fashion. So it's incumbent upon us to get this right. But all the things that we're doing in order to meet that challenge, more restrictive hours of service, slowing trucks down, being compliant with the rules as they are, the hours of service rule with electronic logging devices, we're advocating for all that. But that means it needs more people than it did before to do the same amount of work, and yet our population continues to grow. And I say that to simply tell you that the cost of transportation is going to go up, but it's an investment. I mean, your mango is going to cost more than it used to cost. I hate that, but you should have been paying more for it all along. But the reality is we're reinvesting. That's all a part of us reinvesting into the solutions and we all have. My office needs to be more expensive because the people that are doing it costs more to train them. And in fact, we have milked this about as far as we can, and it's time for us to all understand it's time to reinvest back in our country. And I always use a quote that's attributed to Churchill, but I think there's some question as to whether it was him. You can count on Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other alternative. That's where we are as a country. So it's time for us we know what to do. We just need to get on with doing it.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions from the audience before I bring us to our final question here? Anyone? Takers? Yes, there we go, right here, number 2.
Would you see any value to some entity or consortium that might consolidate these efforts so that an educational institution would have a common place to go, or a business would have a common place to go, to gain the resources they need to either supply the education, supply the support, or provide the potential labor, versus individual industries going to individual educational institutions to create individual programs for their individual need.
Who wants to tackle that one? Bill, you look like you're up to the challenge.
Well, I want to make sure I understand the question first of all. Is there like a central storehouse of resources? Is that
Well, I think maybe to the point of the question, we see a lot of splintered efforts across the state. Sometimes maybe it would be better to consolidate some of those resources and a little more strategically. In playing devil's advocate, it might be better to have a little bit more diversification. What do you see as the proper balance?
I think that there's two approaches to that. One of them, I know of a couple of places in the state that are doing a remarkable job of training and educating and develop for specific needs. I think you will hear from Dr. Glenn Fenner later over at Mid-South Community College. He's got a program over there that's geared to a specific need that exists in that part of the state. University of Arkansas Community College at Marlton has got a program that was developed specifically for the oil and gas business. There was a huge need when the shale play started, and they took it upon themselves to work with Southwest Energy and others to develop a specific program that met that need. So those kinds of situations where it's very specific to a given location, I think make a lot of sense, even though that might be splintered. The other thing I think that we don't need to do is run around creating situations out of convenience that are duplicating services across the state. Within reason of geographic proximity to the need, but also having enough diversity across the state to cover a multitude of programs. Another thing that comes to mind is Black River Technical College up in Pocahontas has got a great nursing program up there. It's the program, though, that's going to produce LPNs, not RNs. And once they graduate through that program, they can be picked up and get an RN thing. So I think there is a need for some diversity or fragmentation, if you will. But on the other hand, I also think that in terms of rallying the troops behind a unified effort, it can't be splintered. We need construction industry, trucking industry, manufacturing industry to all be preaching from the same book here about the diversity of needs, but the need to be unified in the efforts to solve the problem. If that makes any sense.
Roby, if I could respond to that. I think there's some commonality on the education side in matching that up with need. Keep in mind, on the business side of it, it's a competitive advantage for me in the marketplace to be able to be the type of company that can attract and retain the best talent. So I just went out and spent $5 million on a new training center that I think gives me a competitive edge. And if you don't have one and you're in trucking, you're just going to be recycling some old stuff. So I think it's hard. I'd rather see it pushed through the system from the bottom with interested parties that are willing to capitalize and work with you on the other end, the commercial end. But I think it's difficult because not everyone is committed to doing the right thing as maybe a competitor is. So I think that advantage goes to good employers with good benefit packages, good compensation, where you really have value, the value propositions there for that individual for a career path. And those are competitive advantages that I don't want to surrender to the next guy if I'm the better employer.
Did you hear that $5 million? Did you hear that earlier? The questioner over here earlier was looking for money.
You're breaking up on me, Roby. I can't hear you.
She was like, you can't, yeah, right. I got you. Do we have a question over here at 1, and then we'll come back to 4?
Gentlemen, my name is Marty Cloud. I'm with Synergy Tech out of Springdale, Arkansas. We are exactly what you guys were referring to. We're a consortium of some of the largest manufacturers in Northwest Arkansas that nearly 20 years ago couldn't get the quality trained people that they needed from the very beginning. So they all merged their resources together and they conceived us. The manufacturers themselves dictate our training. They say what we train in. We train their existing maintenance workforce to the standards that they require. The problem that we're having now is the fact that we are not set up to train high school students. We're not set to train up unemployed. We're not set to train up anyone that is not already employed by our partner companies. So we're trying to think outside the box now. Issues now are with the government regulations, with funding. We are a nonprofit 501(c)(3). Yes, we would love to train everyone that comes through the doors. It has to be paid for. How do you guys feel about companies like institutions such as us, someone that trains specifically for a pool of companies for what they require?
Phil, I'll let you have first crack at that one.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I 100% understood the question, Roby, with the acoustics. Could you repeat it, please?
Well, is basically they partner with companies in their region, manufacturing companies, to train employees. The manufacturing companies pay for most, if not all, of the cost of that training.
Yeah.
They can't reach the high school students, though, because that just doesn't fall under the purview of what they do. What do you think about companies helping out in terms of picking up the financial tab on this?
Yeah, it's a good question and a difficult situation, because you've structured yourselves and invested to support their needs as a company that maybe is not, for whatever reason now, maybe able to continue to the extent that you'd like to see some growth and you'd like to have other students. And I think you have to look at what actual skills and education are you providing that meets business and industry needs, whether it's that company or another company, and say, if we can't get this company to support us, are there others in a greater area of geography that we could go work with that might have some interest? Or do we ourselves have to get involved in more of an aggressive recruiting process with high schools to go in and identify talent that might be interested in coming to your educational institution to learn whatever skills and trades your organization can deliver? It's not an easy thing. We've learned all across the United States and Canada that trying to find this talent, these individuals that want to do the kind of work that we as business needs, that you as an educational institution can provide, it's not an easy thing. It's labor intensive. It takes time. It takes a lot of extra time trying to find individuals like the lady over here who was willing to try to help us with this recruiting. It takes time to go to the individual schools. There are no easy answers. Again, it's as the governor said, there's no one answer, and everything requires its own unique situation in many of these cases. I don't have a better answer.
And the desperation between different jobs is also maybe part of the answer too. For example, we do tuition reimbursement. It could go from $3,000 to $10,000 for a CDL holder that comes to work for us, that we'll spend an additional $10,000 per individual to stay. Well, we do that every day, a lot of that. But in regards to technicians, we have incentives, where we'll give them a $5,000 set of tools that we give them if they come to work for us. But again, reaching out but then we do recruiting. We have recruiters that go to truck driving schools. We have recruiters who go to campuses to hire IT professionals. And I mean, we are putting out the effort to try to reach out and create bridges, but each group is a little bit different in their needs, if you will. But because the thing that we find is that you'll have an individual that'll want to come to work for you, but literally does not have the money to feed themselves. So, I mean, we feed people. It runs the full gamut. I mean, you all have seen it in your own homes, I'm sure, but it is, there obviously has to be an economic bridge created between that person and the job, and somebody's going to have to pay for it.
The willingness of industry or business to help finance that, though, is there. Agreed?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, last question over here, and then we're going to get to wrap up.
Can you elaborate more on what ways that you work with juvenile facility?
So repeat the question, please.
Can you elaborate a little more on what ways that you work with a juvenile facility?
Juvenile?
Can you elaborate a little bit more on
on how you work with a juvenile facility? On what ways?
Juvenile? Yeah, juvenile. I'm sorry, we can't.
Yeah,
it's
we've got all
echoing,
kinds of, we've got some feedback up here. Did you hear the question?
Yes, but I don't know how to respond. We have some apprenticeship programs where we bring individuals of high school age into and work with us in the summers. I mean, but it's more of it's not an official program. It's not scaled properly. There's limitations on our ability to teach as well because we have a lot of work we need to do and we're short already. I mean, we're short in every area of technician, IT, customer service, fleet management, drivers. We have open positions in every category of our company. I think I started operating a crane when I was about 12 years old, and I wish I could find some more kids like that. I didn't know that it was illegal at the time, but it seemed like the right thing to do. No, and I don't know how we create those bridges between the younger people that have an interest in something that they're disqualified for because of their age.
Do you want either one of you?
Well, I think in our case, we do a lot of internships where we bring people into our company and acquaint them with various aspects of the work that we're doing. Unfortunately, most of those are already in college. And from liability standpoint, it makes it very difficult for us to bring someone under the age of 18 into the company and work in an environment where there's potential danger. We do a lot of tours. We take students, even grade school and on up, as we're building facilities for them. We do a lot of tours to acquaint them with things in our industry, but actually hands-on construction opportunities, we're very limited up until they become 18 because of the liability issues and regulations. Child
labor laws are a bad deal, weren't they? No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. Phil, did you want to touch on that?
I mean, it's like we've also, something that we've toyed with lately, and not necessarily driven by this, but I think it's a good example, is working with the Boys and Girls Clubs and actually getting, the kids out to the office and I mean, we need to go back and really open some people's eyes as to what these careers look like, whether they're in an office or not in an office. And, when I was raised to outwork, outrun, outjump, outfight the next guy. That was what I was expected of me by my dad. And I raised my kids a little differently, but my point, it's time for everybody to say, let's strap on our shoes and let's get with it. And some of it just got to do some butt kicking.
All right, we're going to end it on that note right there. We've got to transition back. Everybody give them a round of applause. Steve Williams, Phil Simon, Bill Hanna, thank you all very much for your participation. And thank you for your great questions. We will see you back in the other room.